Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I am your co-host, Brian Bosarge, along with my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, we are 189 days, 22 hours, 59 minutes, and 30 seconds away from the 2022 NFL Draft.
It's heating up. I feel like this college season's going quick. I look at the schedule. There's not that many games left, and we're kind of moving here into the final month of the regular season. So, I'm feeling good. Keep moving things around my board, but feel like I'm getting some better knowledge and getting better as we go.
We wait forever for the college football season to get here, and then it's like, oh well, it's over now. So
just snap.
But I mean, for us, I mean, the college season's just the beginning. That's when, we kind of hit into overdrive as we prepare for the 2022 NFL Draft. But at this point now, we encourage everybody, if you're live in the chat with us or if you're on Twitter at Draft Countdown, send us in questions and we will answer them at the end of the show. But Shane, the big news this week, it's college football realignment, man. It's getting crazy again. It all started with Oklahoma and Texas announcing, hey, we're going to the SEC, leaving the Big 12. And the Big 12's like, okay, a week later, then they poach the American Conference and take UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati, as well as BYU as an independent program. And that's led us to the next round of craziness where reports out there that within days, by the end of the week, we could see 6 teams from Conference USA, North Texas, Rice, Charlotte, UTSA, Florida Atlantic, and UAB all leave Conference USA to join the American.
I think this cripples the American Conference. I think that's just none of those teams appeal to me at all. Like at all from a college football or even a general sports perspective. I'm not sure there's anyone there. I'm sure there's some sport out there that usually the schools are really good at, but from the big ones, I think it really, I really felt like the American Conference right now is close to the Big 12 in terms of talent. And I don't think it's going to be that way when this all shakes down.
No. And I'm trying, and I see some of these names and I'm baffled by, I guess they're going to say market size or markets in general is why they've done it. North Texas is in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex and Denton. Rice is in Houston, Texas. UTSA, which is really good at football now, don't get me wrong, but they're in one of the bigger, fastest-growing markets in the country with San Antonio. Charlotte is in another fast-growing market. FAU is in the Miami area. I guess Boca Raton's technically the Miami area. And UAB, who has probably the best football program of all 6, if you want to look at, the past few years, is in the smallest market of all, but nobody watches college football more than Birmingham. So, I mean, the UAB and UTSA are the only 2 here that make sense to me, and the other 4 are just why?
Just cash grabs, yeah.
So if you look at it, that leaves that leaves Conference USA with only 8 teams left. And then it reports out today that potentially within the next week that Southern Miss and Marshall will abandon Conference USA or what's left of it and head to the Sun Belt, which 4 years ago would have seemed like a downgrade, but now the Sun Belt is one of the better mid-major group of 5 football conferences out there.
Yeah, I mean, the Sun Belt's getting better. And I think I like Southern Miss and Marshall more than any of the teams that the American Conference is getting, to be honest with you. Like, once again, not big markets, but I think they're better teams. I think they're better in, some other sports too. Like, Southern Miss and Marshall are pretty consistently at least competitive. I think the Sun Belt could be looking real pretty.
I tweeted earlier today about Southern Miss and said, I don't think any school has been more left behind than Southern Miss and all this, the realignment amongst the small schools. I mean, they were one of the better programs, mid-major programs in the country, at one time under then head coach Jeff Bauer. And they've gone from darling to irrelevance like quickly. And it all happened seemingly simultaneously. When the realignment started, is at the time they decided Jeff Bauer wasn't good enough to be their head coach anymore. And that just their descent just went that way. But there are also two other teams rumored potentially heading to the Sun Belt as well. And amongst this, Old Dominion is another from Conference USA that could come there. And with them would be fellow state of Virginia school and FCS superpower James Madison, also rumored to be potentially making the leap up from FCS.
Oh, that's interesting. I think James Madison fits. They've been really good for a long time. My first year teaching, I taught in Southern Maryland, pretty close to James Madison, and there's a pretty fervent fan base there for football and for that kind of football. So that's awesome. I love seeing some of these schools that, we struggle sometimes to like get the film below FBS or get things consistently. At least, once you get up to FBS, I mean, it becomes much, much easier. And it's always good to see these kind of prospects go up against some of these, bigger schools and more likely to schedule a really tough opponent to one of the big conferences, perhaps. So that's exciting.
Yeah. So I guess the broader question for this particular podcast, Shane, is what do you think, what can this realignment mean for us as draft evaluators? I mean, does it make a big difference, or, is it like, I guess with the UCFs and the Houston, Cincinnati, I mean, you're going to see them, I guess, against the Big 12 teams more consistently now would help. Oklahoma and Texas being the SEC, that's really, we're expecting those matchups every week anyway. But like any of the CUSA teams to the AAC, that it's not really going to move the needle for us, right?
I don't think it moves the dial a ton. I think where the whole alignment in general could derail us is if these conferences get so big that they just stop having out-of-conference games. And I think that would be bad. That would be a problem, right? Because I don't know about you, but some of the best sense of some players I get from Conference USA or from from the Sun Belt, sometimes against an SEC opponent or against a Pac-12 opponent early in the season. And if a player really shines and shows they belong, I think it's really helpful in that evaluation. That's my fear. If the SEC gets so big, they're like, well, it's so tough. Like, we're just going to schedule a couple, two low tier schools and FCS or Division II schools and crush them and pay them $1 million and go be on our way. I think that's going to hurt that a little bit. So I think in terms of these lower conferences, like, I think it's good for somewhere like James Madison, where hopefully we can get some prospects there that shine a little bit more, get a little bit more out in the open, and have better competition. But yeah, I would think that the changes aren't going to have too much effect ultimately in some of the Gang of Five stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like you. I like seeing, I know I was really looking forward to last year before the pandemic killed it, was like North Dakota State. I think we're supposed to play Oregon.
Yeah.
So, it's games like that. I mean, and as these conferences get bigger, like you said, we may miss out on some of those games. Let's move on. There was a trade in the NFL this week, Shane. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about it quickly. The Eagles traded tight end Zach Ertz to the Arizona Cardinals in exchange for Tate Gowan, a corner from UCF that was selected in, I believe, the 6th round this year, and a 2022 5th-round pick. You can talk about this two ways. This is fantasy impact first, and then draft impact.
I think fantasy-wise, it's good for my Zach Ertz shares. I feel a lot better that he's not competing with Dallas Goedert anymore for touches, but had a good game that last game. So that was, that's good for me. I think it hurts a guy like Rondale Moore this year. His potential breakout. Now you have, Max Williams was getting a ton of targets and is out for the year in Arizona. I was like, oh, Rondale Moore is going to step up. He's going to get more targets. That's probably gone. He's probably going to get less now because Zach Ertz is there. Maybe he takes it from AJ Green or Christian Kirk. I'm not sure. So, I think that's good. I mean, Arizona's just a legitimate contender, man. Only undefeated team. And that offense is working. I know people – I haven't as much, but I've had my times bagging on Cliff Kingsbury and that jump to the NFL. But he's good at what he does and has basically given everything else to other people. And I think that's what makes a good head coach, is like knowing your limitations, doing what you're good at. The only thing I'm sad is that we didn't get Zach Ertz to play 2 games in 1 week. I know they wouldn't let it happen, but I wanted he played Thursday night for the Eagles. I wanted him to just suit up for Arizona on Sunday, have 2 games in 1 week. Give me double the fantasy points. We could have made that happen.
Apparently that is against the rules. But,
I guess so. Whatever.
Yeah. What can you do? We watched a lot of games this past week, Shane, 16 between the both of us. We're only going to cut it 2 guys. So I'll go to you first. Who was one of the 2 players that you thought stood out the most this week?
My theme this week is players whose teams got crushed but played well. And so I'm going with Josh Paschal, the edge rusher from Kentucky, who I believe you had on your Senior Bowl list, which we'll mention later. But he played up against Georgia. Obviously, Georgia crushed Kentucky, but he was playing up against Warren McClendon, who's a redshirt sophomore on the right side, and he was abusing them. I mean, they ended up having to have Brock Bowers, the freshman tight end, who's a really good pass catcher, block for part of the second half, and they used the guard kind of doubled up on Josh Paschal, who's big, athletic. He was not a player that was super high on my radar coming into the game, and one of my followers had mentioned him, Angelo, and you had him on your list, and I was like, I gotta watch for this guy. And then he had a really good game against one of the best teams, maybe the best team in the country. So I was really impressed. He moved way up my list and was on my names to know list for sure. If people haven't checked him out yet.
Good stuff there. A guy who I'm really starting to take a shine to here this season, and I think he's going to be a prospect or a player that we're going to see in the Senior Bowl coming up, is Tennessee wide receiver Velas Jones Jr. Started his career at Southern Cal. Didn't have a whole lot of success out there outside of his return man. Graduated, transferred to Tennessee, been there the last couple of years. And it seems like the more I watch him, the more impressed I get with him as a wide receiver, where he's more to him than a return man. I think his production is starting to go up. That could be because Tennessee has a lack of other skill players to get those catches, but Velas Jones Jr. has been producing lately. He had 6 for almost 100 this past week. And we mentioned how great of a special teams player he is. He's a great kick returner, good punt returner. He's going to have value at the NFL because of that. He can probably, I'm sure can be a gunner in the NFL if he's not already. And the reason I think he'll also be, with all that value and his elevation as a receiver, I think he gets in the Senior Bowl as well because of his high school play here at Saraland High School, which is a suburb of Mobile. So I think he gets that helps get him into the game. But I think his skills gets him in there. I think that's the selling point. That's what gets him on the posters, Shane, when he gets here.
Yeah, well, that's good. I guess I needed that tip before my article that he's from the Mobile area. No, it's fine. And I think, you talked about special teams being such a big piece to getting drafted as a receiver. And, you and I had talked about that. I think it's important for the people listening to understand too. Like when we see some of these receivers get drafted that maybe aren't high up on the radar, and Velas Jones might be one of those guys. It could be as a return guy, as a gunner. Like those are things that NFL teams need, and that's an important part of a late round pick.
And a good example of that was this past season with LSU wide receiver Racy Mcmath, who essentially caught nothing his entire career at LSU, but I believe got drafted because of his athleticism and special teams ability.
So boom, and had a good decent Senior Bowl at that, right? So that's good. My second player is Martin Emerson, cornerback out of Mississippi State. Someone we added to our list, is an underclassman. Now Mississippi State was going against Alabama. It did not go well for Mike Leach and company. So Emerson was on Jamison Williams for that game, and early in the game it was John Mechie catching a ton of passes. There was one bad play where Jamison Williams had a comeback route, caught the pass, blew past Martin Emerson for like a 70-yard touchdown. He only had one other catch in the whole game. Like Emerson was locking him down pretty well. They ended up Mississippi State tried to move the high safety over to the other side of the field, and Emerson still did pretty well against Williams, who probably is the best receiver on that team, might end up being the highest drafted receiver on that team. So he's a player who's an underclassman, has been pretty successful on a pretty bad SEC defense there at Mississippi State. And I really liked the way he was able to be physical and match the speed that we know Jameson Williams has. Like Williams has size and speed, and Emerson never got like caught behind him. Is really good at knowing where he is on the field, good closing speed. And I thought his technique was good. He played pretty low to the ground, not a lot of wasted movement. So someone that I'm definitely interested in watching some more of, and I think could be a real player, in the day 2 market at corner.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching him myself. He was I think I watched one Mississippi State game that was prior to he was on our list, so I didn't really focus on him, but he'll definitely be a guy I look forward to the next time. Another player that I'm going to talk about today is a guy who I've watched earlier this season. I know you have, and it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback from UCLA. I think he's really starting to emerge this season he's starting to take to that learning, so to speak, of Chip Kelly, and he's developing more and more. Getting his he's not trying to do too much as it is now. Only threw 18 passes this past week, but completed like 15 of them for 186 yards and a couple touchdowns. We knew he has the athleticism, to make the plays with his feet, to escape the pocket. His like I said, his accuracy is improving, and he's got a big arm. I think like we've talked about quarterbacks, and especially in the senior class, where there's a lack of guys at the top, so to speak, and we're going to see 12 to 14 quarterbacks drafted. I mean, that seems to be the average every year. So we're going to see some of these guys go early on day 3. And I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson could be one of those guys, or he could, maybe have a good week, like I said, maybe at a Senior Bowl or a Shrine game or something like that can get him elevated into that late day 3 area like Kellen Mond did last year.
I think he's intriguing. I mean, the physical specimen, the experience, he definitely flashed early in his career. Like he looked like he was going to be an NFL quarterback, kind of fell back. And if he's getting it back now, it's a good sign to get drafted as in a good system. We see someone like Tyler Huntley right out of Utah there in Baltimore, didn't get drafted, but fits that scheme perfectly. Now he's the backup to Lamar Jackson. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson could find a spot on a team that has a little more of a hybrid offense in Arizona, and be able to back up a guy. Could make sense to me.
Absolutely. All right, Shane, every week we talk about our top 5 at a certain position, and we're almost out of these. I think we've got maybe 2 more to go. I think we're going to do interior offensive linemen probably next week. We'll just lump guards and centers together into one, and safeties, and that'll be the end of this little series. But this week, it's the LBs, the linebackers. We're going to give them some love today. And Shane, I thought we would be a lot more different like the tight ends last week, but we seem to have some similar names. We've got a few different ones, but we'll start at the top for me, and this could be recency bias, and it could be my lack of interest in this linebacker class in general, but my number 1 linebacker as of right now is Texas linebacker DeMarvion Overshawn. I'm just in love with his athletic skill set and his ability to make plays, force turnovers, and his game against Oklahoma sold me. Is he going to end up being my number 1 linebacker prospect when it's all said and done? Probably not, but right now I'm enamored with his athleticism.
I mean, I like him too. He's my number 5, and I think after that first game that I watched this season, he just jumped off the page. And then, like you said, against Oklahoma, that first quarter was one of the best linebacker performances I've seen. Just great instincts. I love his physicality. He's big. He's one of the biggest, linebackers I think that are in the high end of this class. So, I'm excited to see what he does. I think he could go either way. I think it could be he just blows up this offseason and is like a back end first round pick, or kind of fades away a little bit. Maybe the athletic number testing isn't there and he's a day 2 guy, but I think he should be a top 100 pick when all's said and done.
I agree. Let's go to your number 1, who is my current number 3 linebacker. Is Alabama linebacker Christian Harris.
and he's not flashy. I think that's the issue with Christian Harris is maybe it's a little bit of fatigue because he's just been there since he was a freshman, doing really great things on the best defense in the country year after year. And now he's not like the play caller. He's not the central focal point of that Alabama linebacking core, but he's still just making play after play. They're putting him in coverage a lot more because he's the most athletic linebacker in that group, and he's doing a really good job at that. I don't know. I just think he has a complete skill set. I think he's going to be a really good athlete and test that well. That's what is going to happen for him. And maybe he's the number 2 off the board, but I think he still could be a back-end first-round pick.
I'm with you on Christian Harris. We share the number 2 linebacker here, Shane, both of us. And I've been kind of here for a few weeks now. I think you've gotten here now. Nakobe Dean from Georgia.
Yeah, it took me a little bit, but last week I was like, Nakobe Dean, you had him in your mock in the first round. I don't know. And then this past week against Kentucky, he was incredible. Didn't have a big stat line, but he was in coverage. He basically stopped a touchdown from happening multiple plays in the end zone that he made. He just flies around the field. He's so super quick, has such good instincts. And I don't know, there's not much to say about him. Like, he has everything that's there. He's maybe a little bit undersized. I think that's probably the biggest issue is going to be fit in some of these defenses. But I think your team is going to really be enamored with him and draft him pretty high.
He doesn't have the stat line of his ex-Georgia brethren, Roquan Smith, but I like him. I don't like him. Maybe I don't like him as much as Roquan Smith, but
no,
he's quite good. I said Christian Harris is number 3 on my list. Number 3 on your list is a guy I've got to dive in because the buzz on him is through the roof right now. Utah linebacker Devin Lloyd.
He's the kind of linebacker that I like a lot. Well, he's like Logan Wilson out of Wyoming.
Well, it's not just you. He's very popular out in the circles right now.
But like Logan Wilson out of Wyoming, your Cincinnati Bengal there a couple years ago, like he was one of those linebackers that I love. I think Devin Lloyd's the same kind of player, just like such a good rap tackler. He seems to just know what the offense is going to do, where the run's going to go. He's always in the right position. He's always doing the right thing. He's that kind of player that is going to be productive in the NFL, that is going to not be a first-round pick because NFL teams are scared away by this or that or this time or that time, and then someone drafts him by his second year. He's top 10 linebacker and tackles in the league and just doing everything he's supposed to do. Like Devin Lloyd's going to be good. He's going to be a good player in the NFL, and I think he's super solid.
I can't wait to watch some more Utah and try to get my focus on Devin Lloyd. More because I'm intrigued by the buzz and intrigued by what you just said and have said to me about Devin Lloyd in the past. We share the same number 4 linebacker here. I was a lot higher on him in the preseason based off what I'd saw from Tennessee games in the past. I'm down on him a little bit now, but he's still number 4. Henry To'o, the linebacker from Alabama. It's like I remember him being more of a playmaker at Tennessee, and you're not really seeing that this year with Alabama.
And I don't know if it's an adjustment thing. I don't know if it's role. It does seem like he is the play caller. He's the quarterback of that defense, and being a transfer and doing that at Alabama is pretty high praise. But they're not really putting him in a position to make big plays, or he's not rushing the passer anymore. Where at Tennessee, he was the defense. Like he could basically do what he wanted because he was the only one that's going to make a play. And that's just not happening. It's very tenuous how he's playing. It's very safe, letting the defensive line do the work, and he cleans it up if he has to. So it's tough to say. I almost want to kind of hope he goes back to school. And maybe it's an adjustment and, transferring to Bama, and he can really bring it in another year. But I still think the potential is there for him to be, first round pick if all goes well.
Yeah, I think we'll see Harris maybe leave early and To'o stay. I don't think they'll both leave early. And hell, they both may come back. So, I mean, they have that option. We've mentioned earlier your number 5 is my number 1, DeMarvion Overshawn from Texas. My number 5 is another Georgia Bulldog. It's Channing Tindall, their linebacker, and this kid can fly. I mean, he makes up space quick. Maybe not as good in coverage as Nakobe Dean, but he can rush the passer. He can get after it, get after the backs in space. Channing Tindall is going to make a team better. Probably a day 2 guy for sure. Maybe early day 3 when it's all said and done. But I think Channing Tindall is a really, really solid player.
And he had a good game against Kentucky too. That caused me to think to move him up to 12 here in mine. But so I agree with you. I think the speed is really exciting. The speed and birth. You know, he's built. He's rocked up. So he's definitely intriguing. And I'm interested to see him at an All-Star game as well, hopefully, and get a chance to showcase that because I think he can.
One player who's neither one of us had, but I did watch this past weekend. I wanted to mention him because you asked me last week about my opinion on Chad Mumma, the linebacker from Wyoming, and I like him. I didn't like him enough. He's not a top 5 backer. I think he's an early day 3 pick, but I think if you like Logan Wilson, I think he's faster than Logan Wilson. I don't think he's as good in coverage as Logan Wilson was. So that's kind of my one game opinion of Chad Mumma, but I think he's going to probably be at the Senior Bowl or somewhere like that and have his chance to make his money there. But we're gonna call it a day on the linebackers, and we're gonna move on to our 14 games we're watching in week 8 this week. And Shane, you're pulling double duty right now. You're doing a podcast in the middle of one of the games you're watching this week. Coastal Carolina at App State currently on right now on ESPN2. Coastal Carolina leads 20-14 at the half. Shane, Grayson McCall is the big prize in this one. The redshirt sophomore quarterback.
He had an excellent pass right as we started the podcast. I was watching it on my phone down here, and I was like, but yeah, definitely an impressive player who I don't think will be in this draft is Grayson McCall, but I think next year, he'll be available and might challenge for a first round pick and be more the higher end of the 2023 class day 2 type. I was hoping to see some more Isaiah Likely, not much so far. The tight end that we talked about last week that was in your top 5. So and then Demetrius Taylor from App State. You and I were talking before the show a little bit about how
he's flashing out there.
Yeah. So some good players in this game. It might appear in my article. Maybe we'll squeeze one in there.
Sounds good. Tomorrow night, 6:30 on ESPN, I'll be watching Tulane at SMU. This may be my 3rd time I've watched Tulane this year. I have to go back and look. Definitely at least my 2nd for sure. But for SMU, they've got a trio of wide receivers. Danny Gray and Rasheed Rice are your borderline late round guys, but the big prize is Reggie Roberson, their senior wide receiver who had the injury last year but has bounced back, having a very big season for the Mustangs. Grant Calcaterra, you mentioned, is what it was on your tight end list, number 3. Get another good look at him. And is it time we add Tanner Mordecai, the Oklahoma transfer, to the watch list here?
I think he's an NFL prospect. I guess he's worth adding for sure. He has the talent coming in. Same thing with McCall. It's like, is he really going to declare? I don't know, but we're not really in the game of predicting per se, because we'd be dead wrong of who's going to come out and who's not. I'm always really, really wrong every year. So maybe Mordecai should make the list. Maybe we'll update that after this week. See what you think.
So Tanner Mordecai, if you're listening, you make the draft countdown watch list if you have a big game against Tulane tomorrow night. Yeah. For some reason, I've decided to torture myself Friday night at 5 p.m. on CBS Sports Network by watching Middle Tennessee State and UConn. UConn fresh off the winless streak by barely beating Yale last week.
Yeah.
I watched them against Fresno State in week 0, and I felt bad for their offensive tackle, Ryan Van Denmark, because I think he has NFL talent. He's just that team is awful. They have another guy who's going to be drafted, Travis Jones, their defensive lineman, probably a big nose tackle prospect with some pass rush upside. Middle Tennessee, Reed Blankenship, maybe probably a guy who gets in a camp at safety. That's about it for the Blue Raiders.
Yeah, Travis Jones is good. Like Van Der Mark too. I think they're both draftable, like you said. I think Travis Jones is really, really good, and just the rest of the team just stinks. So it's hard to evaluate those kind of guys, but I think Jones is going to be someone you'll hear a lot about.
Saturday morning at 11 a.m. on ABC, my first look at Penn State this year. I had to rectify this mistake because they have a lot of players on our watch list that I haven't watched yet, including one of your favorite receivers and a lot of people's favorites. One of their favorite receivers in this class, Jahan Dotson. So this will be my first look at him. I watched Jaquan Brisker last year when I thought he was going to be in the Senior Bowl, then decided to go back to school. So anxious to see how he's playing this year, and amongst some others, not really going to focus much on Sean Clifford if he even plays. If we're going to be honest, call back to one of our first podcasts there. Because some other players, you were high on Joey Porter Jr., probably not getting into this draft class, but a corner there. I hate his father, if that makes you feel any better. Tariq Castro Fields. Another guy to watch, and PJ Mustipher. Unfortunately, he suffered a season-ending injury last week.
Yeah, which sucks because he's going to get drafted too. I actually think, and I'm going to include Mustipher in this, but I think 6 of Penn State's front 7 could get drafted in this draft, which is crazy to think about. But I mean, I think all 3 linebackers. I don't know if Brendan Smith will come out, but Ellis Brooks and Jesse Lakita. Could be late round picks. I think Adiz Isaac probably goes back to school, but Arnold Ebiketie has had a really good season too. So like Penn State's, they're bringing it on defense, and they're a good team, and Illinois gonna run into some problems for this week for sure.
No doubt. I also want to see you're high on offensive tackle Rasheed Walker. So he's another guy.
I was before the season, and then the season
my bad. He's not.
It's been a disaster for Rasheed Walker. I thought he was going to become an elite tackle, and then he just went in the tank. So
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
11 a.m. on ESPNU. Another one for me. Northern Illinois at Central Michigan. We're both about to start watching a lot of MAC football here as they start those weeknight games, but. I'm going to be honest. I'm not saying it's a one-man show for me because Central Michigan has other prospects. But after Dane Brugler a few weeks ago put out an article at The Athletic talking about the Austrian import Bernhard Reimann, maybe I got that right, 6'7", 305, former came over as a tight end and then moved to offensive tackle. Always love those. The tight end to offensive tackle conversions. I think that they make for some of the best offensive tackle prospects, but Ryman is a guy I'm pumped to see against NIU.
Yeah, I think he's an exciting player to watch. I haven't dug into him too much, so he's on my list to definitely get into. Hey, don't forget about Clint Rakovich, Northern Illinois, maybe the second best fullback in this draft. I know how much you like fullbacks, so
fullbacks are slightly ahead of kickers, punters, and long snappers to me. No offense to the fullbacks.
You gave a little special team shout out.
I did. 11 a.m. Big noon kickoff on Fox. Northwestern at Michigan. And before we dive into the top prospects in this one, I guess one of them, he came into the season with a lot of hype. Brandon Joseph, the safety from Northwestern, has he lived up to that hype to you, Shane?
I don't think so. I was never like super high on him. I thought he was a good player, but some people were talking about him as like the top safety in this class. I mean, I think he's in that 5 to 7 range. I think he's a good player. He's an athletic player, but Northwestern's defense has not been good, in part because he has not been as good. He last year he was kind of playing in that back end and in certain times coming up to the line, doing some blitzing, and it's been very vanilla for him, and he's gotten beat a number of times. So maybe he could bounce back. Maybe this Michigan game is a good game for him to kind of bounce back and show what he has. I still think the athleticism's there, so I think I have him at 5 right now in my safeties. But, on the other side, Daxton Hill's another safety I really like. So I think it'll be a kind of a fun comparison to watch those two back-to-back. And I'm still waiting for you to take a Michigan game. I feel like I watch Michigan every week. I
was just about to say that. I was like, I said the same thing about Penn State. I'm like, I've got to get them. And then I looked yesterday. I was like, I haven't watched Michigan yet either.
Yeah. I think we talked about it last week, and I was like, man, Brad still didn't pick Michigan. I guess I got to pick this one up. Like, I'll keep taking them, but you can't pick Michigan, Ohio State. So please, you got to get it in here soon.
Next week is just you leave them all next week,
all right.
and I'll take it next week. 2 p.m. That's a weird kickoff time. 2 p.m. on the Big Ten Network. Wisconsin at Purdue, Shane, and wow, what a game against Iowa last week for Purdue. Or as their official Twitter account put out, they beat the number 2 out of Iowa, which is one of the better tweets I think I've ever seen. But the two of the main reasons that they did that to Iowa was their wide receiver David Bell. What a game he had, and George Karlaftis. Is he working his way into the top 10?
I think he is. I think he has been all season. He's been really, really good. We have him as a D lineman, but he's been playing more on the edge for them this year, and that's where he dominated Iowa against the tackles, which was really impressive at his size. So I think if you need a hybrid, I would love to see him as a 5 tech in the NFL, and a 3-4 would be incredible. Those are two. I don't know if David Bell's a first rounder. He doesn't get a lot of separation, but he's going to make a team happy in the second round. At his size and his athleticism. And Wisconsin's had a down year, but they still have some good offensive linemen. I like Logan Bruss and Joe Tippmann. Bruss probably a late round pick. Jack Sanborn, a later, linebacker. Tyler Beach, a later offensive tackle. Wisconsin's gonna have a lot of guys drafted. It's gonna be one of those things at the end. They're like, look how many players per team was drafted. Wisconsin's gonna be in there, but none of them were that great.
Agreed. Probably I don't know, I'm not even calling it intriguing, but their tight end, Jake Ferguson, has some value to me. Shane, you again dive into the FCS ranks for an ESPN Plus game this week. I like it. Jacksonville State at Sam Houston State. And I know the big prize here for you is going to be Zarek Cooper, the quarterback from Jacksonville State. But I think the best player in this game is Zion McCollum, the corner from Sam Houston State.
I definitely, when I saw this matchup, I was like, "Oh, this is you get to kind of see them go up against each other." I really like Zarek Cooper, whether it be a quarterback. I think he's even a player who can play some receiver or something. And then McCollum's had a good year. I haven't watched him yet this season, but he's big and he's physical. He is big, long, physical corner. And the NFL likes those kind of guys. So when you get to see these kind of smaller school players, especially in the secondary, seems to be, receiver corner, those guys get drafted. So I think McCollum is a draftable prospect.
I know there was a lot of buzz coming into last year with Sam Houston State wide receiver Jaquez Ezzard, small 5'9", 190, probably a slot guy in the NFL. So we'll see him as well. I got to get a look at him, Shane. QB1, 2:30 p.m. on ESPN this week. Pitt quarterback Kenny Pickett. It's my first go for the Panthers this year, and I figured why not against Clemson? Probably the best defense that Pickett's going to face this season. If I had to take a stab at it there, so I figured this was the week to watch Kenny Pickett.
I'm not going to pick Pitt for my lock of the week, but there's a part of me who wants to take them -3 at home against Clemson. He's playing well. Him and one of my favorite receivers for next year on Pitt, Jordan Addison, is playing really well. And I'll see if
not draft eligible, right?
Not draft eligible. 2023, he'll be draft eligible. And one of my stock downs on Clemson, Will Putnam, the guard, had an awful game against Syracuse, against guys I had never heard of. So that's not a good sign, ultimately. when that happens. So I'll be interested to see how you feel about him, and someone on this Clemson offense can redeem their value, perhaps.
It's unreal. I mean, we had 3 wide receivers on our list, and none of them have done anything of note. So it's crazy. I gotta look at this team this past week, and came away impressed with several players. 2:30 p.m. on Fox, Oklahoma State, the undefeated Cowboys at Iowa State. I saw the Cyclones this past week, and a couple of guys that stood out to me were their edge rusher Will McDonald. I thought he had a great game, and we talked about him briefly last week. But I was also impressed with Mike Rose, their linebacker.
I mean, Mike Rose keeps just rising up my list pretty consistently every time I watch him. So I'm excited to see if he can do it again and kind of write him up. Iowa State actually favored against the undefeated Cowboys in Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State, for a team that's playing really well, doesn't have a ton of prospects that excite me. Maybe Josh Sills, the guard, is kind of interesting. Colby Harvell-Peel and Trey Sterling, their safety combo is pretty good. But Iowa State has more of the NFL prospects this year. Obviously, Breece Hall, the running back, as well, is a big, still kind of competing for that day 2 capital. Yeah,
Breece Hall was in my new Splendid 7 that I put out this week. He had the first play of the game, 75-yard TD run for the Cyclones, kind of set that game in motion for him. Still competing to potentially be RB1 there with Isaiah Spiller of Texas A&M. 2:30 on CBS because the Rebels were playing on TV, so Shane has to watch them. LSU at Mississippi, and Matt Corral, number 1 overall pick in your mock draft this week, Shane, to the Detroit Lions.
And may not play in this game. Seems pretty doubtful to play in this one. So we might not get Matt Corral.
Oh no,
he got hurt last week, and college. It's like, I feel like it's, you never know because they don't have to tell you. So you never know what's going to happen. But even if he doesn't play, I'm interested to see if Nick Broker, the tackle there, is someone I liked coming into the season, didn't play so well. See if he can kind of bounce back against a good LSU front. And LSU running back Tyron Davis-Price had almost 300 yards rushing last week. Crazy game for him. So LSU, going to part ways with that Orgeron at the end of the season here. But the team is kind of playing up for it. I still have like Ed Ingram, their guard, pretty high, and I feel like he hasn't flashed at all for me. So I really want to kind of check myself on that and see, like, I just have him there because I had him there in the preseason. You always have a couple of those guys. So there's definitely some players here I wanted to kind of dig into a little bit more.
It feels like I look at our watch list of LSU players, of which there are a lot, but I dare to say at least half of them are hurt or didn't qualify academically in the case of John Emery. But yeah, so that looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to see how LSU plays the string out, if you will, with Orgeron on the way out. 6:30 p.m. ESPN2. I'll be watching NC State at Miami. And the wheels fell off the Hurricanes after that beat down by Alabama in week 1, and they really haven't been the same since. De'Aaron King's hurt. Their best player best prospect at this point has to be Zion Nelson, their offensive tackle. Which he should get some run here against NC State. NC State, the prospect probably that generates the most buzz right now is Ike Mekwonu, their guard. Definitely want to get my eyes on him. He's pretty nasty.
Dude, he's one of my favorites. I've bumped him up like way high now. He's playing tackle for them, and the rest of their offensive line is not good, but he's just knocking guys over every time. I think he's my number 2 guard now, so that's good. And a Miami player I came in with high hopes for that has not played well is Bubba Bolden, their safety. Had a really good season last year. I thought could be a day 2 pick, and he got, I think, thrown out of a game early in the year, and then just hasn't done much. Hasn't looked great. Like, Miami's really bad. So I expect NC State, Zonovan Knight, and Ricky Person to run all over them.
Yeah, their running back Cameron Harris out for the year with a knee injury, reported this week as well. South Carolina at Texas A&M, 6:30 p.m. on the SEC Network. That'll be me. And I messaged you in our Slack chat last week. I said, Zach Pickens just made a play that's going to be on his draft highlight tape, whenever that's going to be, where he literally, there were the Vandy running backs coming through the hole, potentially for a big run. Pickens reaches his big paw out and just pulls him down by the like he was like his 6-year-old or something, and just yanks him down. It was awesome. But Zach Pickens is really he's every week he's starting to flash more and more every week to go along with the consistent playmaking of Kingsley Enagbare, who I think we're both at this point would not be shocked if he was a top 10 pick. We both had him in the top 10 of our most recent mock drafts here to go along. But Zach Pickens, Kenyon Green, are we going to maybe we get that that one-on-one matchup this week, or see how that goes?
That'd be fun. Green's been every bit as good as advertised, and I love me some Pickens. So yeah, man, you have to tell me how that's going for sure. And one other Texas A&M player that we haven't talked about much is Aniyah Smith. Probably more receiver than running back at this point. I don't know where you put him, but I think his speed, he's going to be one of those, gets drafted higher than anyone has him because he's really fast kind of guys. So he's one of those players I keep being like, I should probably move him up, but or move him around. So this would be a fun matchup. Maybe your Gamecocks can hang in there. Maybe they can, get within 20 points.
The spread's 19.5.
So see,
We'll see. For your Debbie listeners out there, Marshawn Lloyd update. He averaged 4.3 yards a carry last week. He's getting on up there, Shane.
Yeah, getting better.
Pretty soon. He actually had a run of over 10 yards last week.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Marshawn Lloyd's going to bring you to the promised land.
Southern Cal at Notre Marshawn Lloyd coming to a transfer portal near you after the season. Southern Cal at Notre Dame, 6:30 p.m. on NBC. I really hope that maybe we get a Drake London in the slot. Kyle Hamilton has to come down on him in coverage. That'd be fun, right?
Yeah, I would love that, man. I mean, Drake London, he could be the first receiver off the board. Like especially if he goes up against Kyle Hamilton and has some success, teams are going to like this production this year. So yeah, I would love to see that matchup. I want to see Drake Jackson, and if he can get it back, I still feel like he's not playing as well as he did 2 years ago. And Notre Dame has some good third day prospects. I think it's maybe not their finest year for draft prospects outside Kyle Hamilton, but there's always going to be a couple. So this is always a good rivalry game, though, and I love me some classic Southern Cal Notre Dame bush push action back in the day. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing. Maybe we will get that little head to head. I probably won't pay much attention to that one since it's going on the same time as South Carolina Texas A&M. But all right, Shane. Now to our favorite gambling segment of the week, the college football lock of the week. Shane, you rode the Arkansas bandwagon last week to an L, while I took Western Kentucky and the minus 12.5 against ODU and took that to a victory. And now we're both 4-3 again, Shane. So, Shane, I'll go to you first. Who is the Shane P. Hallam lock of the week this week?
All right, look, I told you my pick before the show. I'm changing it. I'm changing it on the fly, so you're going to have to cross that. I'm sorry. But, we were going through the games, and I got to pick one of your games. I got to pick one of yours this week. I'm taking SMU minus 14 at home against Tulane. We're talking about Tanner Mordecai, and as we were talking, I was like, man, they're gonna put up like 60 on Tulane, right? They can win by 2 touchdowns. So I think it was our conversation that convinced me this offense is just too good at home. Give me SMU minus 14.
I like it. I'm gonna go to the MAC. not a game we're watching this week, but I feel like Western Michigan is at least a field goal better than Toledo. On the road, even on the road, give me the Broncos laying 2.5.
I mean, Western Michigan beat Pitt, who might win the ACC, right? Like that seems pretty good that they can essentially, 2 points. I mean, as long as they win, yeah. I mean, I love that. They're tough this year.
So Shane, we both last Thursday you released our offensive predictions for the 2022 Senior Bowl. On Friday, I released my defensive projections for the 2022 Senior Bowl, and I think it was met with pretty good enthusiasm here. And I feel pretty good about how we laid things out. Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl tweeted back at us and said we were pretty close on some spots. In one position, we were really close, he said. So I'm looking I feel pretty good about that little project.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of fun. Yeah, you got high praise from Jim Nagy that you had one position almost exactly correct. So pretty impressive on your part for sure. And great job breaking that down, because I think defense, you had the harder job there with the defenders. It gets wacky with the positions and all that. But it was a lot of fun to do because of how deep this class is. I don't know about you, but I felt like I could not fit in all the players I felt like would typically be at a Senior Bowl. And I could have probably doubled the list and felt pretty good about it. And even, looking at my list now, I'm like, man, I should have switched that or should have switched this, and I would have felt better about it. But, that's how it goes. But I like that we put some runners up and put some alternatives. And I think by the time the Senior Bowl week is over, our list is going to look very good, and most of those guys will have been there.
I feel like if we're like 60 to 70% accurate with this list, I will feel ecstatic about where we were. And we talked back and forth, and we'll never know the answer to this because he's never going to tell us. But I think we're both in agreement. The corners that I had listed as probably the position group that was the closest to what he said. I think that's the case. All right, Shane. Every week we wrap up the show with we answer some chat and Twitter questions. We'll go to Twitter first. We got one question in chat. We'll go to the Twitter questions first. At Houston Houdini asks, is there a game I should be looking forward to later this season more than Ole Miss versus Liberty or Bama versus Georgia?
I mean, it's tough to pick a game over Alabama and Georgia, right?
Right. That game there will have 60 NFL draft prospects on the field probably. So yeah, going to be hard to top that one, I would imagine. But I can see where he's coming from with Ole Miss and Liberty. I mean, you get Malik Willis and Matt Corral on the field at the same time, two of the perceived top quarterback prospects. I'm out on Malik Willis. I'm not that high on him, but I'm just not feeling it. I don't get it, but okay.
But it was having a bad game against Louisiana Monroe. Was that the last straw for you? The powerhouse.
Well, the one game I watched, Malik Willis against Syracuse. He was terrible. I don't care what anybody said. That was a bad game for Malik Willis. And then this week when he was basically humbled by the mighty Warhawks of Louisiana Monroe, that did not help my thought process. But yes, the correct answer here is Bama versus Georgia at Houston Houdini.
You can take Ohio State, Michigan if you want. We can get that ready and geared up. But nothing.
You've already picked that game, Shane. I have.
I already put it on the list. So, but I think Alabama, Georgia. That we'll have to fight over that one too.
At SP Torres 7 ask, what position is deeper for 2022, cornerback or edge rusher?
It's a tough one. We talked. I think we mentioned both positions last week. In terms of depth, like it's always a lot easier, I think, for corner to be deeper just because you have more on the field. You can have 3-4 guys. There's some slot guys. NFL teams want those more. But I think if you take the position into account, I do think edge rusher is deeper as a whole. I think there's a lot more here of players that can be solid contributors. And honestly, there's a lot of versatile players in the third day of this draft. Guys that can play 5 technique, guys that can play even a 3 tech. That's an edge. They're an edge rusher, can move the outside, or stand-up linebackers that work in a 3-4 can put their hand down. I think there's going to be a lot of versatile players that fit a lot of different systems, and that's, to me, that's really exciting. I think edge is going to get, pun intended, an edge in this class.
I'm glad you said that, because I kind of mentioned it in my Senior Bowl predictions that there are guys that I have that I listed as edge rushers. They're going to play linebacker, or they're going to play off-ball linebacker at the Senior Bowl. And the first name that immediately popped into my head that I had listed was Jeremiah Moon from Florida. I think he's a guy who's going to end up, being an outside linebacker or an off-ball linebacker at the Senior Bowl if he comes down here. So, but yes, I think I'm with you. I think edge is deeper, but I think corner is deep as well. But I'm with you on the edge. Not a question per se, but earlier draft guy Jimmy here said DTR should return for another season. Is he eligible to return for another season?
Like I stopped pretending to know about eligibility and what it could possibly be after this. So
I'm with you. I kind of want to look now. Maybe I need to go look and see what his status is considered. I just assumed he was done. Last question here in the chat from Dwayne Lavelle. Just for fun, you need a running back. A good runner is a given, but do you shoot for one who can block better than catch, or catch better than block? Can't have both.
I think the fantasy player in me where it wants to say catch, but honestly, if you can block, then you get on the field. Look at a guy like Chris Evans for your Bengals. I think would be a great example of a player who's good, like really, really good pass catcher, and maybe he's coming.
How the hell did he not touch the ball at Michigan?
Have you seen Michigan try to develop offensive talent? They haven't since Jamara's been there. That's been a big problem. But he couldn't block for the first few weeks, and when he was on the field, it was literally every time he was running a route. Defenses knew it was a pass and knew he was running a route. Like, it's a problem. So I think blocking. I think you can. I always say this, and that just because a player isn't catching doesn't mean they can't catch. But blocking can really take you to the next level. So I'm going to go contrarian here. I'll say I'll take the blocking running back.
I think a good example of that at the NFL level right now is Jonathan Taylor. He's a guy who didn't catch a lot of balls at Wisconsin, but he can do it. When asked to, he's really good at it. I thought he would be the NFL level when I had famously had him as the number 2 overall player in his draft class. I have regrets, but anyway, it is what it is. But thanks for all those questions out there. Hope we answered them to your satisfaction. Shane, you got a pretty fun thing coming out tomorrow.
I'm excited. It's probably the deepest I've went on an article. I actually have film GIFs to put into the article and take a look at what's happening, what's actually going on. So, but I'm publishing an article about who I think is the next James Robinson, and who's going to be an NFL starting running back that not a lot of people are talking about. So I'm pretty excited, and that'll be coming out pretty early tomorrow morning.
I'm pumped up to read it. I have no idea what I'm coming up with on Friday. I told you before we started. We'll see. We'll see what the old brain can come up with the next 24 hours to get up on the site for Friday. But that's going to do it for tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown for everything we do at Draft Countdown. Like us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel so you can be notified when we go live with these shows. You'll also see your notifications on Twitter. If you listen to us on Apple, Podcast or Spotify, give us a rating. Tell everybody why they should be listening to the best NFL draft and college football podcast that goes out on the airwaves. For Shane P. Hallam, I'm Brian Bosarge. Good night, everybody.